This week, another cancellation. Instead, we'll discuss the flurry of activity surrounding artificial intelligence over the past week as the new administration settles in and China shocks the market. In the Leadership and Communication segment, how CISOs can elevate cybersecurity in boardroom discussions. Nearly half of CISOs now report to CEOs, showing their rising influence. Steve Jobs shared one crystal clear way you'll spot an exceptional leader, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Do your end users always, and I mean always without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. That's the number 1 password.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 380, recorded January 27, 2025. I am your host, Matt Alderman. No, I did not make it to the national championship game. I loved the result, but ticket prices were skyrocket. Like I had flights, people. I had flights, hotels. I was going. I couldn't get tickets that were affordable. Joining me for this segment is my co-host, Mr. Ben Carr. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Matt, great to be back with you again today. Yeah, ticket prices on everything are just outrageous, right? Makes the cost of eggs seem palatable.
Yeah. So just so people know, right? So when Ohio State won against Texas on Friday, I started looking at ticket prices. They're about $2,500 a seat, right? And I was like, it's a little expensive because they were kind of like corner seats. They were third deck, right? They weren't the best seats. I'm like, typically as you get closer to an event, prices drop. They kind of dropped on Wednesday. They got like the corner nosebleeds got down to like $1,700 a piece. And they were in the Notre Dame section, which look, I would have sat in the Notre Dame section because I like Notre Dame too. And I said, no, they got to keep coming down. They started going up. At game time, those tickets were over $3,000 a piece in the third level, like the upper level. It was nuts. Yeah. So I flew the kids here and we watched the game in Texas.
It doesn't make sense, man. I don't get the driving prices, but it is what it is. Sorry, you couldn't go.
I know. It's such a bummer. All right. One quick announcement, and then we're going to jump in. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSA Conference 2025 full conference pass. RSA Conference will take place April 28th to May 1st in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC25 and use the code 5U5SecWeekly. I'm already registered. I'm going. I hope to see you there.
As well. Come join us.
I think you're going to be there too. Yeah. Come say hi.
Yeah, I will.
All right. So this is our second interview cancellation this year already. We're still in January, which just bums me out because I bring these people on for free to talk about a topic and then they cancel on me. It's so frustrating. So instead of just doing one long news segment, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the flurry of activity surrounding artificial intelligence. And in my description, I describe it starts back in December. So the previous administration put out an executive order to kind of look at artificial intelligence. And so Congress put together a joint task force, went out and researched artificial intelligence, and came back with a list of areas and recommendations. And there's some really good data in that report. The article is in the link. And then if you click inside the article, it links you to the congressional report. There's some really good stuff in there. So that drops. We get a new administration and then a flurry of executive orders, canceling old ones, creating new ones. It's been a crazy week. So I thought, let's kind of break this down a little bit. Like, where are we going? Like, what? I mean,
Kind of the yo-yo of presidencies here. Yeah.
Yeah, well, here's what I've been able to discern, right? Through all these articles and all this research that I've been working through since last week was the real difference in the executive orders was how restrictive could the private sector be when it came to AI. Now, he didn't, so the new administration, Trump's administration, did not revoke any of the ones focused around government use of AI. He revoked the ones that put restrictions on private use of AI. And I think what you're seeing here is like, let's get the regulations out of the way. Let's let innovation ring and let the private sector continue to drive AI innovation. That's the big difference I've seen in this flurry of activity is take the handcuffs off private sector, keep some of the things in place for government usage, and then figure out where the market goes from there.
So I find this challenging, right? Because I'm kind of two minds with regard to regulation. So in general, I'm opposed to it. I think like the less you have regulation, the more it frees up, private industry to kind of do its thing, and as long as you're not getting into monopolistic stuff. But the problem becomes in AI. I'm interested in your thoughts, Matt, because I want to see where you come out on this. I feel like there does need to be some structure around this because I think we're moving a lot faster than mentally in a generation. We're able to actually take in the potential for danger and harm, right? But where I'm of two minds on this is the challenge of, look, it's just like it's like energy too. If we're the only ones doing anything, then what good does it do? We're just putting ourselves behind, right? So I think when you think of countries like China, other potential issues, like it's just problematic to think about if we're not innovating at the same speed and without the restrictions that they have, puts us in a disadvantage and potentially one that could affect national security. So do you agree with me on being of two minds, Matt? Or like, how do you come out?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So DeepSeek is the news that dropped on Friday that has freaked everybody out, right? They supposedly have created an AI model in less than a year that's 20 to 50 times more powerful than ChatGPT for the same cost. Okay. So what I think we were seeing is we want to keep our innovation in AI because of the potential threat of China. And China turned around like 3 days to, well, depends on which order you're talking about, within days and dropped that bombshell, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of the two mindset as well. There's certain things I'd like to see regulated in some respects, but in other areas, we have to allow ourselves to innovate in this space. Otherwise, China gets there faster, cheaper, and it creates some issues for us, right? So that's why I go back to the Bipartisan Task Force report, because it put some really interesting recommendations in place around federal preemption to state law. Because again, if we don't get federal regulations, we're going to get state-based regulations like we do on the breach laws today, right? Yep. Because we never did anything at the federal level, we have 50 plus variations of breach law. The report comes out and says, yeah, we should preempt state law. We should put in a federal regulatory environment. So at least everybody's on the same playing field.
Yeah, exactly. Playing on the same field, and there's fairness there. Yeah,
exactly.
And I think you don't get confusion in how people develop, where they develop. That's a problem.
The second one that comes out of that report is data privacy and ensuring privacy for people. I think that's an important thing that should also be done at the federal level. Again, so everybody's at the same playing field, because right now we have multiple privacy regulations out there. The last one, that's it, there's more in here, is national security, right? There has to be a standard around how to protect our national security with these technologies, either foreign or domestic. It shouldn't matter, right? But we should have those. Like those three to me make sense to be at least regulated to a standard that everybody plays to the same level. And then you let innovation take off.
Yeah, and I think I think I saw a lot of this stuff with the recent discussion around TikTok, right? Like where a lot of people, consumer end of the market, were like, "Hey, don't take away my TikTok, right? Because I'm either making money on it, I get enjoyment out of it." But at the end of the day, there was a national security concern, I think, legitimate potentially behind that. And I think you're going to see that much more in the AI space. I was seeing some reporting today on, concerns over the information coming out of DeepSeek, that it was very slanted, right? Arguably so. So if you're, forget about the potential long-term defense concerns about that. If the information itself is being manipulated in such a way that people are taking it as truth when it's maybe not, we've had this discussion before about other things, right? I mean, what is truth now, and how do you evaluate that? I mean, I think there does need to be some regulation in that space, and I think it's challenging. It's challenging when there's not a lot of leadership in that area.
Agreed. So that's what I'd like to see. And I think we're getting some repeal to help innovation. We'll talk about innovation in a second. But I still think there's some things that probably have to be put in place to create a level playing field for everybody. Now let's talk about the innovation side of this, because this, a lot of executive orders got signed on Monday, repealed some, added new ones, etc. Was it Monday night, Tuesday? The announcement of Stargate, which is an AI infrastructure project, right? Now, Ira Winkler kind of went off on LinkedIn about this, saying that there's not $500 billion in these three companies to fund this thing.
I think Elon might have said the same thing, like had a big post about that.
But here's what you have to think about, right? The reason SoftBank's in this announcement is they're going to go raise capital. They're going to go raise funds,
yeah, exactly.
Right? These are not going to come from the balance sheets of Oracle and OpenAI and anybody else who participates. And there will be more participants, by the way. SoftBank's in this because they're going to go raise investment dollars. That's where the money is going to come from. And this project is already started. So the Reuters article that I dropped in here, article number 4, actually talks about the project's already underway. They're already starting to build these data centers in Abilene, Texas, which is literally like two hours from me up the road. They're already building this. Part of this money is already being spent. There's already stuff going on to start to build out this. There's a commitment of initially $100 billion. And I think SoftBank goes out and finds investment to go fund the rest. And that's before the government gets involved and figures out how to fund some of this as well. But the announcement was to drive innovation, right? And I think there is an opportunity here for us to lead in certain areas, because after the DeepSeek announcement on Friday, we might actually be a little behind.
Yeah. Look, I think it's going to take investment, right? And I think you're right that was really to get people interested, to put the investment behind it, to realize that, hey, here's kind of a moonshot, right? That we have to do. We have to get investment and people interested in it, start moving to get where we need to go, right? You're never going to be, if you're driving a motorcycle and you're looking at where you are, you're always getting an accident. You got to be looking where you want to go, right? That's where this came out. Now, got a lot of other concerns around this, right? I mean, power being one, like you're a Texan now, Matt. I'm a Texan. Like, where's this power coming from to drive all these projects, right? It's not just about the compute and the AI. It's about all the other associated infrastructure that's going to be required to get there. And it's going to be a big number.
It is. But again, if you look at the moves he made, he declared an energy emergency, which allows us to open up drilling and some other things. I think nuclear has to play a big role here. You've got some nuclear power facilities here in the state of Texas. You could see expansion
you saw Microsoft
of nuclear power
on that, right? They're bringing back on 3 Mile Island, right? Like to generate power. So I think, I think there will be a renewed interest in nuclear, and it has to be part of the play.
It does. Now, I spent 7.5 years in nuclear power. Some people know. I think the way to approach nuclear going forward is trying to find a way to standardize plant designs for new designs going forward. I think the thing that the French did really, really well in their nuclear power program is they standardized the plants. In the United States, we had a ton of different types of plants. I worked at 2 different types of plants, right? And the problem is when you have all these different types of plants out there, you don't learn the mistakes of one to retrofit the rest, right? Yeah. They all have to experience pain in some part of the process. By standardizing the plant designs, what France is able to do is when there's an issue at one, they can proactively go fix it at all the other ones. I would love to see kind of a strategy around nuclear power plants of standardizing a plant that can be used to power these data centers, these innovation centers that give us the power we need without needing to, drill and use oil and coal for all this stuff, even though it's a short-term filler. And by standardizing the plants, we'll get reusability, I think, in a very scalable way. I would love to see that. Having been on the nuclear power side, like if we could standardize those designs and use those designs to power this infrastructure, it would be a big win because it would scale.
I think there's been some move even on the DoD side about smaller plants where they theoretically could power like a base, right, like a facility, as opposed to massive plants that are required and require a lot more infrastructure support and risk. So I think we're going to see more interest and more innovation on this side.
Yeah, so that leads me to this deep seek set of things that happen on Fridays, because we're worried about building these data centers, how we're going to get power to these data centers. And then China turns around and finds a way to build a high-performing AI model at a fraction of the energy and cost of what we've done today. So the reason the market's such in the tank this morning for the tech stocks is, wait a minute, is there a different way to achieve performance than just hardware?
Do you think that they're so with the announcement and how far they want to indicate they are ahead? Do you think that that's some amount of just bluster, right? Or do you think that is an accurate statement that they're that far out? I mean,
I think that's what everybody's trying to figure out,
right?
Right. I mean, according to them, they said the DeepSeek R1 model, which was released last week, is 20 to 50 times cheaper to use than OpenAI's 01 model, depending on the task, according to the company's site. Now, obviously, people are going to figure it out on their own. They're going to test it. I guess this app has taken over the number one download over ChatGPT from the Apple Store, right? So people are using this. So if people start comparing the performance side by side, and these numbers are real, this is a huge shock to, I think, some of the big technology providers that think the only way you get high-performing artificial intelligence model is through large compute systems. And the other thing is, did they get access to the NVIDIA H100s? Are they only using the H800s? There's a lot of, they're not supposed to get it because of the export controls, but did they actually get their hands on? There's details to come, Ben, but if the numbers hold, that's a huge shock to the existing kind of AI infrastructure we've been thinking about.
It is. And then, look, I would question, hearkening back to the TikTok thing, right? Like, obviously, if there are concerns about that from a national security level and they're willing to put restrictions on that, that would also indicate to me that, I would look out for some similar action coming out of Congress, right? And depends upon what the current administration wants to do about it. But I could see those same concerns being here, sourcing that model. And again, a restriction coming out against using models from
other countries.
Other countries that potentially might not have our best interest in mind, right?
That could pose national security risks. That's why I go back to the original bipartisan report that says, look, if we can't put guardrails in place for those three areas, national security being one of them, how else do we put everybody on a level playing field? I don't know.
I think that's going to be really hard. Yeah,
it is. If the model comes from a foreign country, we can't use it. Well, maybe we can't use it in the government, but you can use it in private sectors as long as there's not a government. It would be really nice to have some clarification around that, so we know whether these models can be used from these other sources or whether companies can only use stuff coming out of favored allied countries.
And I think that's where, from my standpoint, when you look at the government, one of the things you are looking for is stability and a long-term plan, right? One of the things that really hurts industry in the U.S., especially in the tech sector, is when it's unknown. And think you see that reflected in the stock market a lot of times, right? If there's this perception that we don't know how the rules are going to change, or how, a new administration is going to come in and they're going to change the regulation, either add or remove it, makes it really hard to make a decision in the tech space about how you're going to go down that road that then may either break or put you at a competitive disadvantage because you are or aren't using something that's provided by someone else, right? I mean, those dependencies really, really critical. And I think you see that stability, and no one wants to see that, especially reflected in their stock portfolio.
Yeah, agreed. And again, it's regulation. How can regulation help to level the playing field so it's not a guessing game and we don't see these wild spikes? I think NVIDIA's stock was down something like 12, 13% this morning.
Yeah.
Just on the DeepSeek news from Friday. That's a pretty big swing for a stock in a day.
Yeah. So supposedly Yahoo Finance is saying just as of, I guess, like a half hour ago, $1 trillion rout in U.S. and European technology stocks as investors question the spending. So yeah, I mean, it's not small potatoes. I mean, this has real world impact for a lot of people. Now, I'm sure there'll be a bounce back on this, right? Like it's the instantaneous change. But yeah, I mean, the long term implications are what happens and how do we properly mitigate the impact and make sure we're effective moving forward.
Yeah, so that's where I want to see guidance from the administration going forward. Because I think now that this news is dropped, now that we're in an AI arms race, because that's really what we're in right now, how do we put guardrails in place to allow innovation to happen, but protect things like privacy and national security?
Agreed.
Yeah, it'll be interesting times. All right, Ben, we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.